Welcome to Midnight Mysteries. Tonight, we venture into the fog-laden streets of London, where death keeps a punctual appointment. Hercule Poirot, the celebrated Belgian detective, finds himself summoned to Scotland Yard, where a most peculiar pattern has emerged. Murder, it seems, has developed a fondness for Tuesdays. Join us for The Tuesday Night Murders, a tale of hidden connections, methodical death, and secrets that bind the living to the grave. This mystery unfolds in the spirit of Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this enigma is crafted on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The pattern emerges. The summons arrived on a Thursday morning, which struck me as oddly appropriate given the circumstances I was about to discover. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, had been enjoying a leisurely breakfast at Poirot's Whitehaven Mansion's flat when the messenger appeared. A young constable, breathless and pale, bearing an envelope stamped with the seal of Scotland Yard. Poirot received it with characteristic precision, slicing the envelope with a silver letter opener and extracting the single sheet within. His eyes, those remarkable green eyes that missed nothing, moved across the page with measured deliberation. "Well," I prompted, buttering my toast with perhaps excessive enthusiasm. "What does Japp want now?" "It is not Inspector Japp who writes," Poirot murmured, his waxed mustache twitching almost imperceptibly. "It is Chief Inspector Walton, a name I do not know, but the tone—" He set down the letter and touched his fingertips together in that familiar gesture of contemplation. "The tone, Hastings, speaks of desperation inadequately concealed beneath official courtesy." "Desperation? We are invited—" "No, we are implored to present ourselves at Scotland Yard at our earliest convenience." Poirot consulted his pocket watch, a ritual as ingrained as breathing, "which, given the nature of the request, shall be within the hour." I abandoned my toast. When Poirot moved with such purpose, interesting developments invariably followed. The fog that March morning clung to London like a widow's veil, grey and oppressive, muffling the clatter of hooves and the rumble of motor cars. Our taxi crawled through streets rendered ghostly by the murk, and I found myself wondering what manner of case could prompt such urgency from the upper echelons of the Metropolitan Police. Scotland Yard's corridors bustled with their usual controlled chaos, but I noted the looks that followed Poirot as we were escorted to Chief Inspector Walton's office. Curiosity, certainly. Perhaps hope. And beneath it all, the unmistakable weight of fear. Chief Inspector Walton proved to be a tall, angular man with prematurely grey hair and deep-set eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. He rose as we entered, extending a hand that trembled slightly before he mastered it. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming so promptly." His voice was hoarse, as though he had spent considerable time either shouting orders or suppressing the urge to do so. "Please sit, both of you." We arranged ourselves in the worn leather chairs facing his desk. The office was utilitarian, almost Spartan, save for one anomaly: a large calendar pinned to the wall behind Walton. Tuesday marked in aggressive red circles on 2 consecutive weeks. Poirot, naturally, noticed immediately. "The Tuesdays, they are significant, non?" Walton's jaw tightened. "You might say that, Monsieur Poirot. You might well say that." He pulled a folder from his desk and laid it before us with the care of a man handling explosives. 2 weeks ago, on Tuesday the 4th of March, Sir Edmund Blackwood was found dead in his study, poisoned. Last Tuesday, the 11th, Mr. Gerald Hartley suffered an identical fate. Both deaths occurred in the evening between 8 and 10 o'clock. Both men were prominent members of London society. And both— He paused, his fingers pressing white against the folder's edge. Both received a curious invitation before their deaths. An invitation I leaned forward. To what? That, Captain Hastings, is what we cannot determine. Walton opened the folder, revealing photographs of two men, one distinguished with silver temples and an aristocratic bearing, the other younger, perhaps 40, with the solid frame of a former sportsman. Sir Edmund Blackwood, 63, retired diplomat. Mr. Gerald Hartley, 41, financier. On the surface, their circles barely intersected. Different clubs, different social sets, different generations, and yet both are dead, Poirot supplied softly. By the same method, on the same day of the week. The little grey cells, they detect a pattern most disturbing. Walton nodded grimly. There's more. In each case, we found this among the victim's personal effects. He withdrew a small envelope from the folder and passed it to Poirot. I watched my friend examine it with meticulous attention. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive stock, addressed in elegant copperplate script. Inside was a single card, similarly handwritten. Your presence is requested for dinner. Tuesday evening, 8 o'clock. Come alone. There was no signature, no address. Both victims received this exact invitation? Poirot asked. Word for word, same handwriting, same paper. Our analysts confirm it. Walton's voice dropped. And yesterday, Monsieur Poirot, we discovered that a third invitation has been sent. The words hung in the air like the fog outside, cold and suffocating. To whom? I demanded. Lady Constance Ashworth, widow of Lord Ashworth, philanthropist, notable society hostess. Walton retrieved a third photograph, a handsome woman in her 50s, her expression captured mid-laugh, surrounded by elegantly dressed admirers at some glittering function. She came to us yesterday morning, having heard rumors about Blackwood and Hartley. She received her invitation on Wednesday and had the presence of mind to connect the timing. She brought the invitation to you. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. She did. We have her under discreet protection, but... Walton spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. Next Tuesday is in 5 days, Monsieur Poirot. 5 days to prevent a third murder, and we have nothing. No fingerprints on the invitations, no witnesses to their delivery, no connection between the victims that we can establish. The poison used, a rather exotic compound, our medical examiner informs me, leaves no supplier trail we can follow. Poirot was silent for a long moment, his fingertips pressed together, his eyes half closed in that attitude of intense concentration I knew so well. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost dreamy. You say no connection between the victims. But this, Chief Inspector, this I find most difficult to accept. 3 persons of London society, all receiving the same invitation, all targeted by the same killer, there must be a thread that binds them. The question is not whether such a connection exists, but where it hides. We've investigated thoroughly, Walton said, a defensive edge creeping into his tone. Different clubs, different charities, different social circles. The visible circles, we. Poirot opened his eyes. But what of the invisible ones? The associations that polite society does not acknowledge. The connections that exist in shadows rather than drawing rooms. Walton stared at him. You think there's something secret? I think, Chief Inspector, that a murderer who operates with such precision, the same day, the same method, the same invitation, is not acting at random. This is a pattern most deliberate, and patterns, they have origins. Somewhere, these 3 people share something worth killing for. He rose abruptly, and I scrambled to follow suit. You will provide me with complete files on both victims, including their financial records, social calendars, and personal correspondence. I will also require an interview with Lady Ashworth at the earliest opportunity. Poirot paused at the door, turning back with an expression that made Walton straighten involuntarily. And Chief Inspector, the protection on Lady Ashworth, it must be absolute. The killer, they have shown patience and method. They will not be deterred by ordinary precautions. We departed Scotland Yard into fog that had thickened to the consistency of cream. As our taxi navigated the spectral streets, I found my thoughts circling like confused birds. A serial poisoner, Poirot. It's rather frightening, isn't it? Someone out there, methodically selecting victims, killing with such regularity. Frightening, yes. Poirot's voice was contemplative, but also revealing, Hastings. Consider, why Tuesday? Of all the days the week offers, why does our killer choose this particular evening? Perhaps it's simply convenient? An evening they have free? Perhaps. Or perhaps Tuesday itself holds significance. A meeting that once occurred on Tuesdays, an event of importance. His fingers drummed against his knee. And the invitations, identical, formal, commanding, your presence is requested. Not a friendly dinner party. None. This is something more. A summons. A ritual. You think these dinners actually take place? Poirot's gaze grew distant. I think, mon ami, that we are looking at the end of something. These deaths, they are not beginnings, they are conclusions. Someone is settling accounts, closing a ledger written long ago. He touched his mustache thoughtfully. The question that burns in my little grey cells is simple. What debt could possibly require such payment? That afternoon, we received the files Walton had promised, thick folders documenting the lives and deaths of Sir Edmund Blackwood and Gerald Hartley. I spent hours poring over financial statements and social calendars, while Poirot sat motionless, reading each document with the intensity of a scholar deciphering ancient texts. Sir Edmund Blackwood's life unfolded in predictable patterns of diplomatic service and aristocratic obligation. Posted abroad for decades, Paris, Vienna, Constantinople. He had returned to London 5 years ago to enjoy a quiet retirement. His finances were solid if unspectacular, his social engagements routine, his correspondence unremarkable. Gerald Hartley presented a different portrait. A self-made man who had risen from modest origins to considerable wealth through shrewd investments, he had been something of a social climber, ambitious, charming, and not universally liked. His financial records showed the aggressive dealings of a man who played to win, though nothing overtly criminal emerged from the pages. I cannot see it, I admitted as evening drew in, rubbing my tired eyes. They moved in different worlds entirely. Blackwood was old money, old establishment. Hartley was new money, still fighting for acceptance. Where's the connection? Poirot looked up from a letter he had been examining, one of dozens from Hartley's personal correspondence. You look, Hastings, but you do not observe. Consider this. He passed me the letter. It was dated 18 months ago, addressed to Hartley from his solicitor, discussing arrangements for the quarterly dinner and mentioning a sum of £50 as the usual contribution. A dining club of some kind? I ventured. So it would appear. And now, observe this. He handed me a second document, an entry from Blackwood's personal diary, nearly 2 years old. Tuesday. The circle meets. Ashworth in rare form. Ashworth, I breathed, as in Lady Ashworth's husband? Lord Frederick Ashworth, deceased these 18 months. Poirot's eyes glittered. The same period during which both Sir Edmund and Mr. Hartley appear to have attended mysterious Tuesday gatherings. A circle, Hastings, a private dining circle, and now its members are being murdered, one by one. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the March evening. But Lord Ashworth died of natural causes, didn't he? Heart failure, I believe. So the death certificate states. Poirot rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded street. But death certificates, they can be accommodating when the deceased is wealthy and the physician is discreet. No, Hastings. I suspect that Lord Ashworth's death was the first of these Tuesday murders. The first that went unnoticed, unremarked, attributed to age and failing health. Good God, then the killer has been at work far longer than anyone realizes. Poirot turned from the window, his expression grave. "Tomorrow, we interview Lady Ashworth. And I think, mon ami, that we shall discover secrets that polite London would prefer remain buried." The fog pressed against the windows like something alive, something hungry. Somewhere in the city, a killer was counting the days until Tuesday. Chapter 2. The Victim's Circle. Lady Constance Ashworth received us in the drawing-room of her Mayfair townhouse the following morning. It was a room designed to impress. Silk wallpaper in pale gold, furniture that whispered of generations of careful acquisition, and portraits of Ashworth ancestors gazing down with aristocratic disapproval at anyone who dared enter without proper lineage. Lady Ashworth herself proved more approachable than her surroundings suggested. She was a handsome woman, as the photograph had indicated, but the strain of recent days had etched fine lines around her eyes and mouth that no amount of powder could conceal. She wore black, still in mourning for her husband, I noted, and her hands, though steady, never quite stopped moving. "Monsieur Poirot." She extended her hand with practiced grace. "I confess I feel rather foolish, involving the police over what might be nothing more than a cruel prank. But when I heard about poor Edmund and then Gerald..." She gestured toward a settee. "Please sit. Tea is coming." "You knew both victims well, Lady Ashworth?" Poirot inquired, settling himself with the careful precision of a man who found most furniture inadequately symmetrical. "Edmund, certainly. He was a dear friend of my husband's. They served together in the diplomatic corps years ago. Gerald..." She hesitated, her fingers finding a fold in her skirt and smoothing it repeatedly. "Gerald I knew less well. He was newer to our set. Ambitious, charming in his way, though some found him rather pushy. And yet both men were part of a circle that met on Tuesday evenings," Poirot said quietly. "A circle of which your late husband was a member, perhaps even the founder." Lady Ashworth's composure flickered. It was brief, barely a heartbeat. But I saw it, and I knew Poirot had seen it too. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, her voice cooling by several degrees. "Madame, I must be direct. 2 men are dead. You yourself have received an invitation that suggests you may be the next victim. If there is information you are withholding for reasons of propriety or loyalty or discretion, I urge you to reconsider. The killer, they do not care for such niceties." For a long moment, Lady Ashworth was silent. Then, with a sigh that seemed to deflate her elegant posture, she rose and moved to a small writing desk by the window. From a locked drawer, she withdrew a leather-bound journal. "Frederick kept this," she said, handing it to Poirot. "I found it after his death, hidden among his private papers. I confess I've not read all of it. What I did read disturbed me greatly, and I chose not to continue." Poirot accepted the journal with something approaching reverence. "You knew of the Tuesday gatherings?" "I knew my husband dined out on Tuesday evenings with a group of friends. He called it simply the Circle. I assumed it was cards or port and politics, or whatever it is men do when they wish to escape their wives." A bitter smile crossed her face. "It appears I was naive. And the other members of this circle, you know their identities?" "Some of them. Edmund, of course. Gerald Hartley joined perhaps 3 years ago. There was also..." She paused, her brow furrowing. "A solicitor, I believe. Cuthbert Vine, and a doctor, Dr. Marcus Webb. Frederick mentioned them occasionally." I was writing furiously in my notebook. "Anyone else?" "A younger man, Harold Pemberton. Something in finance, I believe. He worked with Gerald on several ventures." Lady Ashworth's hands twisted together. "And there was one other, though I never learned his name. Frederick referred to him only as our host. I gathered he was the one who organized the dinners, though Frederick was deliberately vague on the subject." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "This host. Did your husband ever describe him? His appearance, his occupation, anything at all?" only that he was indispensable, that the circle could not function without him. Frederick said he had a talent for bringing people together, for making arrangements. She shuddered slightly. I didn't ask what that meant. I'm not certain I wanted to know. The tea arrived, and for several minutes, conversation turned to more conventional matters. But my mind was racing with the implications of what we had learned. A secret society of sorts, meeting on Tuesday evenings, a mysterious host. And now, systematically, the members were dying. Poirot, meanwhile, had opened Lord Ashworth's journal and was examining its contents with intense concentration. I caught glimpses of dates, initials, and figures. Financial notations, perhaps, or records of some kind. "Lady Ashworth," he said at length, "your husband's death 18 months ago, the doctors attributed it to heart failure, yes?" "Yes. Frederick had been unwell for some time. His heart had been troubling him for years." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice. "You don't think—" "I think nothing yet, madame. I merely observe. Your husband died on a Tuesday evening, did he not?" The colour drained from Lady Ashworth's face. "My God, I never— Yes, it was a Tuesday. He had gone out for dinner, one of his circle gatherings, and came home early, complaining of chest pains. By midnight he was dead. And the dinner that evening, it was hosted in the usual location?" I assume so. Frederick never told me where they met, only that the location was discreet." Poirot closed the journal and tucked it carefully into his coat. "You have been most helpful, Lady Ashworth. One final question. This invitation you received, when precisely did it arrive?" "Wednesday morning, in the post, like any ordinary letter. No return address, of course." "And the postmark?" Lady Ashworth blinked. I didn't think to look. The police have the envelope now." "Bien, I shall examine it." Poirot rose, and I hastily gulped the remainder of my tea. "In the meantime, you must maintain the protection the police have arranged. Do not go out alone, do not receive visitors you do not know, and above all, do not respond to any further invitations, no matter how innocent they may appear." "You think I'm truly in danger?" Poirot's expression was grave. "Madame, I think you may be the only one who can help me identify the killer, and that makes you dangerous to them in return. We must act quickly. Tuesday approaches." In the taxi returning to Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat with the journal open on his knee, his eyes scanning the cramped handwriting of the late Lord Ashworth. "What does it say?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "Many things, Hastings. Many disturbing things." He turned a page, his expression darkening. "This circle of which we speak, it was not merely a dining club. It was, if I understand correctly, a society for the exchange of favors. Favors of the most delicate kind. Lord Ashworth, it seems, had a talent for knowing secrets, and for using that knowledge to benefit himself and his associates. A business rival's indiscretion, a politician's hidden vice, a society lady's past mistakes." Poirot shook his head slowly. "All documented here. All leveraged for profit, advancement, or simple power." "Blackmail," I said flatly. "The word is ugly, but accurate, though I suspect the members of the circle would have preferred to think of it as mutual assistance. They shared information, pooled resources, covered for one another when necessary. A network of complicity, bound together by shared guilt." I felt faintly ill. "And the victims? Blackwood, Hartley. They were part of this?" "Undoubtedly. Which means the killer may be one of two things, either a fellow member with a grievance or—" Poirot's eyes met mine. "Or someone who suffered at the circle's hands. Someone who lost everything, reputation, fortune, perhaps even a loved one, because of what these men did." "Revenge," I murmured. "The oldest motive in the human heart." Poirot closed the journal with a soft snap. We must locate the surviving members of the circle. The solicitor, Cuthbert Vine. The doctor, Marcus Webb. The financier, Harold Pemberton. And most importantly, the mysterious host, the one who arranged everything, who brought these men together in the first place. Do you think one of them is the killer? Poirot was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was troubled. I think, mon ami, that the truth is more complicated than we yet understand. The invitation cards, they are the key. Identical, formal, untraceable. Someone with access to all the members. Someone who knows their habits, their schedules, their vulnerabilities. Someone who has been among them all along, watching, waiting. The taxi lurched to a halt outside Whitehaven Mansions, but Poirot made no move to exit. Hastings, there is something else, something that troubles the little grey cells. What is it? Lady Ashworth. She claims to know little of her husband's activities, yet she knew precisely which drawer contained his private journal. She speaks of the circle with distaste, yet she has kept its secrets for 18 months. His mustache twitched thoughtfully. She is either a most loyal widow, protecting her husband's memory, or she knows far more than she has revealed. That afternoon, I set about locating the surviving members of the circle while Poirot retreated to his chair with Lord Ashworth's journal and a pot of strong coffee. By evening, I had assembled a small dossier. Cuthbert Vine, solicitor, maintained offices in Lincoln's Inn Fields. A man of 62 with an impeccable reputation and a client list that read like Burke's peerage. He had served as Lord Ashworth's personal solicitor for 20 years. Dr. Marcus Webb, physician, kept a fashionable practice in Harley Street. 55, unmarried, known for his discretion in treating society's more sensitive ailments. Several of his patients, I noted with interest, had been mentioned in Lord Ashworth's journal. Harold Pemberton, financier, was the youngest of the group at 38. He had made his fortune in shipping investments and was known as Gerald Hartley's protégé and closest associate. According to the society pages, he had been notably absent from public events since Hartley's death. 3 surviving members, I announced, presenting my findings, plus Lady Ashworth and the mysterious host. Poirot looked up from the journal, his expression grim. 4 survivors, Hastings. You forget, we do not know if the host is still alive. Lord Ashworth's notes refer to him only by an initial, R.M. M. That's rather unhelpful. On the contrary, it eliminates 2 possibilities immediately. Neither Vine nor Pemberton begins with M. That leaves Dr. Webb, whose Christian name is Marcus, or someone we have not yet identified. You think the doctor might be the host? It is possible. A physician has access to poisons, to drugs, to knowledge of human frailty. And Dr. Webb's practice, with its emphasis on discretion. Poirot spread his hands. He would be well positioned to learn secrets, non. The confessions of the sick, the fears of the dying, these are valuable currency in the world Lord Ashworth inhabited. I considered this, but if Webb is the host, and the host is the killer, why would he target his own members? What would he gain? An excellent question. Poirot rose and began to pace, his patent leather shoes silent on the carpet. Unless the host is not the killer, but the target. Unless someone is eliminating the circle to reach him, to flush him out of hiding perhaps, or to ensure that no witness remains when the final confrontation occurs. Good Lord, you mean the killer might be saving the host for last? It is one possibility among many. Poirot stopped at the window, gazing out at the London night. Tomorrow, we interview the survivors. Vine, Webb, Pemberton. We must discover what they know, what they fear, and most importantly, what sins they have committed that might inspire such methodical vengeance. He turned from the window, and in the lamplight, I saw something I rarely witnessed in my friend's face. Genuine apprehension. Tuesday, Hastings. It approaches with the inevitability of death itself. And somewhere in this city, a killer is preparing their next invitation. Chapter 3. The third Tuesday. The following days passed in a whirlwind of interviews, investigations, and mounting tension. With Tuesday looming like an executioner's appointment, Poirot threw himself into the case with an intensity I had rarely witnessed. Our first call was upon Cuthbert Vine at his chambers in Lincoln's Inn Fields. The solicitor received us in an office that spoke of generations of legal tradition, leather-bound volumes lining the walls, a desk worn smooth by decades of document signing, and the faint aroma of dust and old paper that seemed to permeate every corner. Vine himself was a tall, spare man with silver hair and the carefully neutral expression of one accustomed to hearing confessions without judgment. He listened to Poirot's questions with professional composure, though I noticed his fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around his fountain pen when the circle was mentioned. "I am aware of the deaths, naturally," he said, his voice measured. "Edmund was a client and, I flattered myself, a friend. Gerald Hartley I knew less well, though we moved in similar circles. A tragedy, both of them. And the Tuesday dinners," Poirot pressed gently. "You attended regularly, did you not?" Vine's composure flickered. "I'm not certain what you're implying, Monsieur Poirot. I dine out frequently. Many gentlemen do. I imply nothing. I merely observe that Lord Ashworth's private journal makes frequent reference to your attendance at gatherings of what he termed the circle. Gatherings at which, it would seem, certain arrangements were discussed." The solicitor's face hardened. "Lord Ashworth's journal is private property. I fail to see how—" "Lord Ashworth is dead, Monsieur Vine, as are 2 other members of your little club, and unless you wish to join them, I suggest you reconsider your reluctance to speak." For a long moment, Vine was silent. Then, with a heavy sigh, he set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "What do you wish to know?" "Everything. The circle's purpose, its members, its activities, and most importantly, the identity of the man you called your host." Vine's eyes darted to the door as though checking that it was firmly closed. "The circle was a mutual benefit society, you might say. Men of position and influence, pooling our resources for common advantage. Nothing illegal, I assure you." "Blackmail is illegal, monsieur." "We preferred to think of it as leverage. Information exchanged for favors. Introductions facilitated. Obstacles removed." Vine spread his hands. "The world runs on such arrangements, Monsieur Poirot. We merely formalized what others do informally." "And the host, the one who organized these arrangements?" Vine hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw genuine fear. "I cannot tell you his name. I do not know it." "You dined with him regularly, and do not know his name?" "He was careful. Obsessively so. We knew him only as the facilitator. He arranged everything, the venues, the information exchanges, the payments. He took a percentage, naturally, but his true value lay in his connections. He seemed to know everyone's secrets, everyone's weaknesses. It was as though he could see through walls. And you never questioned this anonymity. One does not question a man who holds such power, Monsieur Poirot." Vine's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I have seen careers destroyed, families ruined, men driven to suicide, all because they crossed the facilitator. We were grateful to be his allies, rather than his victims." Poirot leaned forward. "And now that members of the circle are dying, do you still feel grateful?" Vine's face had gone grey. "I've taken precautions. My doors are locked, my servants vigilant. But I confess," he swallowed hard, "I confess I have not slept well since Gerald's death. The invitation, you know about the invitations?" "I do. I check my post each morning with trembling hands. Each day that passes without that cream-colored envelope feels like a reprieve from the gallows." He met Poirot's eyes, and I saw naked terror in his gaze. "Find this killer, Monsieur Poirot, before he finds me." Dr. Marcus Webb proved considerably more difficult to interview. His Harley Street receptionist, a formidable woman with steel-gray hair and a manner to match, initially refused us entrance entirely. "Dr. Webb is with patients," she declared. "He cannot be disturbed." Poirot drew himself up to his full, if modest, height. "Madame, I am Hercule Poirot. The doctor will see me, or he will explain to Scotland Yard why he refused to cooperate with a murder investigation. The choice, it is his." The receptionist's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. 5 minutes later, we were shown into Dr. Webb's private office. The physician was a compact man in his mid-50s with clever dark eyes and hands that moved with the precise economy of a surgeon. He did not rise as we entered, remaining seated behind his mahogany desk with an expression of barely concealed irritation. "I can spare you 10 minutes, Monsieur Poirot. My schedule is extremely demanding." "Then I shall be brief." Poirot settled into the chair opposite without waiting to be invited. "You are a member of the organization known as the Circle. 2 of your fellow members are dead. A 3rd has received a death threat. I wish to know what you can tell me about these matters." Webb's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "No. Then perhaps you can explain why Lord Ashworth's journal lists you as attending 17 Tuesday gatherings over the past 3 years, or why your name appears in connection with the phrase medical consultation, discretion assured, in relation to at least 4 separate individuals whose secrets were subsequently leveraged." The doctor's composure cracked, just slightly. "Lord Ashworth's journal should not be in your possession. And yet it is, as are the records of payments made to your practice from sources that have no obvious connection to medical services. Payments, I might add, that coincide precisely with dates on which the Circle met." Webb rose abruptly, turning to face the window. When he spoke, his voice was cold. "I am a physician, Monsieur Poirot. People tell me things in confidence. Sometimes that information proved useful to my associates. I saw no harm in sharing it, particularly when the individuals in question were themselves engaged in unsavory activities. You betrayed your patient's trust for profit. I protected myself and my position. The world is not kind to those without power or connections." Webb turned back to face us, his expression hard. "If you're looking for the killer, I suggest you look elsewhere. I have no reason to harm my fellow Circle members. We were allies, not enemies." "And the facilitator? The host of your gatherings?" For the first time, I saw genuine unease cross Webb's face. "I know nothing about him, nothing that would help you." "You do not know his identity?" "No one does. That was the arrangement. He communicated through intermediaries, through letters, through other means. I met him perhaps twice, always in dim light, always briefly. He was a shadow, Monsieur Poirot, a voice in the darkness." "Describe him." Webb hesitated. "Medium height, slender build, soft-spoken. Beyond that." He shook his head. "He could have been anyone. That was his power, his anonymity. He was everywhere and nowhere." Poirot studied the doctor for a long moment. "One final question. Where were you on the evenings of March 4th and March 11th? "Here, working late. My receptionist can confirm it." "Both evenings." "I often work late, Monsieur Poirot. Medicine does not observe business hours." We departed with more questions than answers. In the taxi, Poirot sat in brooding silence, his fingertips pressed together in that familiar pose of concentration. "He is lying," he said at length, "about something. The little grey cells, they detect the scent of deception. About the facilitator? Perhaps, or perhaps about something else entirely." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "We must find Harold Pemberton, the young financier. He is the final piece of this puzzle." But Harold Pemberton, it transpired, did not wish to be found. His townhouse in Belgravia was shuttered and dark, the servants dismissed. Inquiries at his club revealed that he had not been seen since the day after Gerald Hartley's death. His business associates claimed ignorance of his whereabouts. Even Scotland Yard's resources failed to locate him. "He has gone to ground," Poirot observed grimly. "Like a fox sensing the hounds. The question is, does he hide from the killer, or is he the killer hiding from justice?" Monday evening found us back at Whitehaven Mansions, surrounded by documents and notes, the remains of a neglected dinner growing cold on the sideboard. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Tomorrow, if the pattern held, someone would die. The protection on Lady Ashworth. "It is adequate," Poirot asked for perhaps the 5th time. "Walton has stationed 4 officers around her house," I assured him. "No one approaches without being observed. She's as safe as she can be. And yet I am troubled." Poirot rose and began to pace, his small feet silent on the carpet. "The killer has shown themselves to be methodical, patient, cunning. They have delivered invitations without being seen, administered poison without detection, killed twice without leaving evidence. Such a person will not be deterred by police guards. What more can we do?" Poirot stopped at the window, gazing out at the London night. The fog had returned, wrapping the city in its grey embrace. "We can set a trap," he said softly. "Lady Ashworth received an invitation. The killer expects her to respond, to come alone to some designated location. But what if she does not come alone? What if Hercule Poirot is waiting?" "Poirot, you can't be serious. We don't even know where the dinner is meant to take place. The invitation gave no address." "Précisément, which means the killer must communicate further instructions. They must make contact." He turned from the window, his eyes gleaming. "Tomorrow, Hastings. Tomorrow we watch and wait, and when the killer reaches out to Lady Ashworth, we shall be ready." Tuesday dawned grey and cold, a fitting atmosphere for what lay ahead. By 8 o'clock that morning, Poirot and I had installed ourselves in a small study adjacent to Lady Ashworth's drawing room, concealed behind a service door that offered a clear view of the main entrance and the Morning Post. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Lady Ashworth, pale but composed, sat in the drawing room with a book she did not read, her eyes constantly drifting to the clock on the mantelpiece. The police guards maintained their positions outside, visible through the windows as reassuring blue-clad sentinels. At 11 o'clock, the post arrived. I watched Lady Ashworth's hands tremble as she sorted through the letters. Bills, invitations to social functions, a note from a friend in the country, and then her fingers stopped. A cream-colored envelope, no return address. Elegant copper-plate script. "Poirot," I whispered. He was already moving. We emerged from our concealment as Lady Ashworth looked up, the envelope clutched in her white-knuckled grip. "It came," she said, her voice barely audible. "A second one." Poirot took the envelope with gentle hands, examining it with intense concentration before slitting it open with his pocket knife. Inside was a single card, identical to the first, except for one crucial addition. "Your presence is requested for dinner. Tuesday evening, 8 o'clock. The Ashworth Family Mausoleum, Highgate Cemetery. Come alone." "The mausoleum," Lady Ashworth whispered, "where Frederick is buried." Poirot's expression was grim. "The killer makes their intentions clear. This is not merely murder, Lady Ashworth. This is ritual. This is statement. They wish you to die where your husband lies." "Then I am to be bait." "Non." Poirot's voice was firm. "You are to remain here, under guard. Hercule Poirot will go in your place. The killer wishes a victim. They shall find instead a hunter." I stared at my friend in alarm. "Poirot, this is madness. You'll be walking into a trap." "Precisely, mon ami." His mustache twitched with what might have been a smile. "But it is a trap that works both ways. Tonight, the killer expects to claim their 3rd victim. Instead, they shall find themselves face to face with justice." The clock struck noon. 8 hours until the appointed time. 8 hours until we confronted a murderer. Chapter 4. Threads of Connection. The afternoon hours slipped away like sand through trembling fingers, while Poirot made preparations for the evening's confrontation, conferring with Chief Inspector Walton, arranging for plainclothes officers to position themselves discreetly around Highgate Cemetery. I found myself unable to sit idle. "There is something we are missing, Hastings," Poirot had said before departing for Scotland Yard. "The pattern, it is incomplete. While I arrange the trap, you must continue to pull at the threads, visit the scenes of the previous murders, speak to the servants, the neighbors. Someone saw something, someone always does." And so I found myself at 2:30, standing before the elegant townhouse in Kensington where Sir Edmund Blackwood had met his end. The house had the shuttered, melancholy air of a place touched by tragedy. Black crape still hung in the windows, and the brass knocker had been draped in mourning cloth. A young housemaid answered my knock, her eyes red-rimmed and wary. "I'm afraid the household isn't receiving visitors, sir," she began. I produced my card. "Captain Hastings, I'm assisting Monsieur Hercule Poirot with the investigation into Sir Edmund's death. Might I speak with whoever is managing the household?" The maid's expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been hope. "You'd best speak with Mrs. Patterson, sir, the housekeeper. She's been holding things together since it happened." Mrs. Patterson proved to be a stout, capable woman in her 50s, her grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her manner briskly efficient despite the grief that shadowed her eyes. She received me in the servants' hall, a pot of tea appearing with practiced automaticity. "We've already spoken to the police, Captain Hastings," she said, pouring with steady hands. "Told them everything we know, which isn't much. Sir Edmund dined alone that evening, said he was expecting a visitor, but to leave them undisturbed. We heard nothing unusual. Found him the next morning in his study, stone cold. The visitor, did anyone see them arrive or depart?" Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "Sir Edmund had given strict instructions. We were to remain below stairs after 8 o'clock. The visitor would admit themselves through the garden entrance." "The garden entrance?" "Yes, sir. There's a door at the back of the property, leads directly into Sir Edmund's study. He used it for private meetings." Her lips pressed together in a thin line of disapproval. We knew better than to ask questions. I leaned forward. "Mrs. Patterson, I must ask, these private meetings, did they occur regularly? Perhaps on a particular day of the week?" Something flickered in the housekeeper's eyes. "Tuesdays, sir. Every Tuesday evening without fail. Had done for years, long as I've been in service here." "And on those evenings, Sir Edmund always used the garden entrance for his visitors?" "Yes, sir. Said it was more discreet." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Though I'll tell you something I didn't tell the police, Captain. That last Tuesday, the night Sir Edmund died, I happened to glance out my window around 7:30. Saw a figure in the garden, approaching the study door. My heart quickened." "Can you describe them?" "Not well, I'm afraid. It was dusk, and they wore a dark coat and hat. But I can tell you this. They moved like they knew the way. No hesitation, no looking about. Walked straight to that door like they'd done it 100 times before." "Man or woman?" Mrs. Patterson frowned, considering. "I couldn't say for certain. Medium build, perhaps a bit slight. Could have been either, truth be told." I thanked her profusely and departed with my mind racing. A familiar visitor. Someone who knew the garden entrance, who moved with the confidence of long acquaintance. Someone Sir Edmund had trusted enough to receive alone, without servants, without witnesses. Someone who had used that trust to kill him. My next stop was Gerald Hartley's residence in Mayfair, a newer, flashier establishment that spoke of recently acquired wealth and social ambition. Here, the atmosphere was less grief-stricken and more frankly chaotic. Hartley, it emerged, had died interstate, and a small army of distant relatives had descended upon the property like vultures, squabbling over the carcass of his fortune. The butler, a dignified man named Simmons, received me in the pantry, the only room, he explained apologetically, not currently occupied by warring family members. "A terrible business, sir," he said, his professional composure frayed at the edges. "Mr. Hartley was not an easy master, but he didn't deserve that. Tell me about the night he died." Simmons's account matched the police reports. Hartley had dined at home alone, claiming to expect a late visitor. The staff had been dismissed early, unusually early, Simmons noted, as Hartley typically kept them on call until midnight. The visitor had apparently admitted themselves, as no one in the household had opened the door. "When did you discover the body?" "The following morning, sir. Mr. Hartley had not rung for breakfast, which was unlike him. I found him in the dining room, slumped over the table. The doctor said, 'Poison.' Was there any evidence of the visitor? Wine glasses, plates, anything to suggest a shared meal?" Simmons hesitated. "That's the curious thing, sir. There were 2 glasses on the table, both used, and 2 plates, though only one had been touched. As if Mr. Hartley had laid out a dinner for 2, but only he had eaten." "The visitor didn't eat?" "It would appear not, sir. The police took the glasses and plates for examination, but I overheard them saying the poison was in Mr. Hartley's wine only." I frowned. "So the killer sat across from him, watched him eat and drink, knowing the wine was poisoned, and then simply left?" "So it would seem, sir." Simmons' face was pale. A cold-blooded business, if you'll forgive me saying so. Before I departed, I asked the same question I had put to Mrs. Patterson. "These late visitors, Mr. Simmons, did they occur regularly, on a particular day?" "Tuesdays, sir. Always Tuesdays." I returned to Whitehaven Mansions as the afternoon shadows lengthened, my notebook filled with observations and my mind churning with implications. Poirot had not yet returned from Scotland Yard, so I spread my notes across the dining table and attempted to organize my thoughts. The pattern was becoming clearer. Both victims had received their killers willingly, even eagerly. They had dismissed their servants, opened private entrances, laid out dinners for 2. They had trusted their murderer completely, right up until the moment the poison took hold. But who commanded such trust? Who could move freely among the members of the circle, welcomed without question, admitted without suspicion? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door. Poirot entered, his expression grave but alert, his movements carrying that particular energy that indicated his little grey cells were fully engaged. "Hastings, you have been busy," he observed, noting my scattered papers. "Excellent. What have you discovered?" I recounted my interviews with Mrs. Patterson and Simmons, emphasizing the key points: the familiar visitor at Blackwood's garden entrance, the uneaten dinner at Hartley's table, the consistent pattern of Tuesday evening meetings with dismissed servants and private admissions. Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "This confirms what I had suspected. The killer is not a stranger, Hastings. They are known to the victims, intimately known. They have been welcomed into private spaces, trusted with solitude, received with the familiarity reserved for old friends or close associates. One of the circle members, then. Perhaps, or perhaps—" Poirot paused, his eyes distant. "Perhaps someone who served the circle. Someone essential to its function, yet invisible in its hierarchy. Someone who arranged the meetings, delivered the messages, knew every secret. The facilitator," I breathed. "Just so." Poirot rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the gathering dusk. "But I have learned something else today, Hastings. Something that changes everything." "What?" "I visited the General Register Office. I've been researching the histories of our suspects, their families, their connections, their pasts." He turned to face me, his expression grave. "Harold Pemberton, the young financier who has so conveniently vanished, he is not who he claims to be. What do you mean? His name. It is false? Harold Pemberton did not exist until 7 years ago, when a man of that name appeared in London with letters of introduction and a modest fortune to invest. Before that, Poirot spread his hands. Nothing. A ghost. You think he assumed a false identity? I'm certain of it, and I believe I know his true name. Poirot retrieved a folded document from his coat pocket, a faded newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. 8 years ago, there was a scandal. A young man named Martin Ashworth, nephew of Lord Frederick Ashworth, was accused of embezzlement. He had been working at a bank, and a significant sum went missing. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Martin Ashworth, I repeated, a relative of Lord Ashworth, his brother's son. And here's where it becomes most interesting. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Martin Ashworth always claimed innocence. He insisted he had been framed, that the true embezzler had manipulated the evidence, had used connections to ensure his conviction. He named his accuser Gerald Hartley, who at the time was a rising star in the financial world and eager to eliminate a rival. I stared at my friend, the implications crashing over me like waves. Hartley framed him, and Lord Ashworth was on the board that reviewed the case. He could have intervened, could have protected his nephew. Instead, he sided with Hartley. The family connection was quietly buried, and Martin Ashworth was left to rot in prison while his uncle prospered. Good God. I sank into a chair. And you think Martin Ashworth is now Harold Pemberton? The timing is precise. Martin Ashworth was released from prison 7 years ago. Harold Pemberton appeared in London 7 years ago. Poirot tapped the clipping thoughtfully. A man with a burning grievance against Hartley, against Lord Ashworth, against everyone who conspired to destroy him. A man who spent 5 years in prison, planning his revenge. But if Pemberton is the killer, why did he flee? Why not simply continue his work? Perhaps he did not flee, Hastings. Perhaps he has gone to ground to prepare for his final act. Poirot's voice dropped. Tonight, at the mausoleum where Lord Ashworth lies buried, someone expects to claim Lady Ashworth as their third victim. If that someone is Martin Ashworth, a man who lost everything because of this family, then tonight's confrontation will be about more than murder. It will be about justice, I murmured. His kind of justice. Précisément. Poirot glanced at the clock. 5:30. We have 2.5 hours, Hastings. Time enough to prepare. Tonight we end this. The fog was rolling in as darkness fell, wrapping London in its cold embrace. Somewhere out there, a killer was preparing for Tuesday's final appointment. Chapter 5. The pattern within the pattern. The clock showed 6:30 when Poirot suddenly stiffened in his chair, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Non, he whispered. Non, non, non. I looked up from the revolver I had been checking, a precaution for the evening's excursion. What is it? Poirot set down his cup with exaggerated care, as though it were made of the finest crystal rather than ordinary porcelain. His eyes had taken on that peculiar gleam I knew so well, the look of a man whose little grey cells had suddenly rearranged themselves into a new and startling configuration. I have been blind, Hastings. Blind and foolish. The pattern, I saw only what the killer wished me to see. I don't understand. Poirot rose and began to pace, his movements quick and agitated. We have assumed that Harold Pemberton, Martin Ashworth, is our killer. The motive is perfect, Non. He was framed, betrayed, imprisoned. He returns under a false name, infiltrates the circle that destroyed him, and systematically eliminates its members. It is logical, it is elegant, it is... I stopped abruptly. It is too perfect. Too perfect? Consider, Hastings. Martin Ashworth spent 5 years in prison. During that time, he would have had ample opportunity to plan his revenge. He is intelligent. He successfully assumed a new identity, built a new career, gained access to the very men who ruined him. Such a man would not make mistakes. And yet someone has made a mistake? Several mistakes. Poirot held up one finger. First, the invitations. Why send them? If Pemberton wished to kill Blackwood and Hartley, he could simply have done so. He had access to them. He was trusted by them. The invitations serve no practical purpose. They only draw attention to the pattern. He raised a second finger. Second, the timing. Why Tuesday? If Pemberton sought revenge, any day would serve. But Tuesday specifically invokes the Circle's meetings. It is theatrical. It is symbolic. It is, one might say, a message. A third finger joined the others. And third, most importantly, the method. Poison is a particular choice, Hastings. It requires knowledge, access to exotic substances, understanding of dosages and delivery. Gerald Hartley was a financier. What would he know of poisons? You're saying Pemberton isn't the killer? I'm saying that we have been led by the nose, like trusting hounds following a false scent. Poirot's voice hardened. Someone wants us to believe that Martin Ashworth is the murderer. Someone has constructed this narrative with care and precision, and that someone is the true killer. I struggled to follow his reasoning. But who? And why frame Pemberton? Poirot returned to his chair, but he did not sit. Instead, he stood behind it, his hands gripping the leather backrest, his eyes fixed on some distant point only he could see. Let us return to fundamentals, Hastings. What do we know with certainty? The victims were poisoned. They received invitations. They died on Tuesday evenings. And what else? They were members of the Circle. They were involved in blackmail. They trusted their killer enough to receive them privately. Précisément. Now, who among our suspects possesses all the necessary qualities? Who has access to poisons? Who knows the Circle intimately? Who could be received without suspicion by both Blackwood and Hartley? I considered the question carefully. Dr. Webb has access to poisons. He was a Circle member, and as a physician, he would be admitted anywhere without question. Very good. Continue. Cuthbert Vine knew them all. As their solicitor, he would have access to private meetings, but I don't see how he would know about poisons. And Lady Ashworth? I hesitated. She claims to know little about the Circle, but she did know where her husband kept his private journal. She knew about the Tuesday meetings, even if she claims ignorance of their purpose. And a thought struck me. And she married Lord Ashworth. She would have known Martin Ashworth before his imprisonment. She would know his history, his grievances, his face. Now you begin to see. Poirot's voice was soft, almost sad. Lady Ashworth, the gracious widow, the seemingly innocent victim, targeted by a mysterious killer. But consider, Hastings. She is the one who brought the journal to our attention. She is the one who named the Circle's members. She is the one who received an invitation and immediately went to the police. You think she's the killer? I think. Poirot paused, choosing his words with care. I think that Lady Ashworth knows far more than she has revealed. I think that her role in this tragedy is not that of victim, but of architect. And I think that tonight's appointment at the mausoleum is not a trap set by the killer, but a trap set for someone else entirely. The implications were staggering. I sank into my chair, my mind reeling. But why? Why would Lady Ashworth kill her husband's associates? What could she possibly gain? Poirot retrieved Lord Ashworth's journal from his desk and began flipping through its pages. I've been studying this document, Hastings. It contains detailed records of the Circle's activities, the secrets they gathered, the leverage they applied, the profits they shared. But there is one name that appears with curious frequency. One person who seems to have been involved in every major decision, every significant transaction. Who? Lady Ashworth herself. Poirot found the page he sought and handed it to me. Read. I scanned the entry, dated 3 years prior. Sai brought new information regarding the Henderson matter. Most useful. Arranged for M to verify through medical channels. Facilitated meeting between Henderson and V for resolution. C took usual percentage. C, I murmured. C for Constance. So I believe. And observe, she took usual percentage. Lady Ashworth was not merely aware of her husband's activities. She was a participant, perhaps even, Poirot's eyes gleamed, perhaps even the facilitator herself. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The facilitator, I repeated slowly. Vine said the facilitator was a man. He described him, medium height, slender, soft-spoken. Vine said he met the facilitator perhaps twice, always in dim light, always briefly. A woman of Lady Ashworth's build, dressed in masculine clothing, speaking softly. In such conditions, the deception would not be difficult. Poirot nodded slowly. And consider how perfect a disguise it was. The men of the circle would never suspect that their mysterious host was a woman, still less the wife of one of their own members. But if Lady Ashworth was the facilitator, if she was the one running the circle, why would she kill its members? Ah, Poirot raised one finger. That is the question that unlocks everything. Why indeed? He resumed his pacing, but slower now, more measured. Lord Ashworth died 18 months ago. His death was attributed to heart failure, but we now suspect poison. If Lady Ashworth killed her husband, she would have inherited his fortune, his position, his secrets. She would have become the sole controller of the circle. But the circle members knew her identity. They could expose her. Précisément, they were liabilities, witnesses, potential blackmailers themselves. Poirot's voice hardened. One by one they had to be eliminated, but carefully, cleverly, in a way that would never point to the grieving widow. And so she created a fiction. The vengeful nephew returned from prison to wreak his terrible revenge. Harold Pemberton, I breathed. She framed him. She did more than frame him, Hastings. I suspect she may have killed him. I stared at Poirot in horror. Killed him? But he vanished. We assumed he fled. We assumed what we were meant to assume. A man with a clear motive for murder suddenly disappears after the second killing. Naturally, we conclude he is guilty and in hiding. But consider an alternative. What if Pemberton discovered the truth? What if he realized that Lady Ashworth was the facilitator, that she had killed his uncle, that she was now eliminating the circle members and preparing to blame him for everything? He would confront her. And she would silence him permanently. Poirot's expression was grim. I believe Harold Pemberton, Martin Ashworth, is dead, Hastings. And I believe his body will be found in or near the Ashworth family mausoleum tonight. Good God! Lady Ashworth invited us to search for a killer at the mausoleum. She has positioned herself as the victim, the target, but she is nothing of the kind. She is the spider at the center of the web, and tonight she intends to complete her design. But how? What is she planning? Poirot consulted his pocket watch. 7 o'clock, 1 hour until the scheduled meeting at the mausoleum. I do not know precisely, but I can guess. The police expect the killer to appear at the mausoleum to claim Lady Ashworth. When they find instead a dead body, Martin Ashworth's body, they will conclude that the vengeful nephew was indeed the killer, but that he died before completing his work. Lady Ashworth will be seen as the fortunate survivor, the final intended victim who escaped by the merest chance. Case closed. It's monstrous. It is brilliant. There was no admiration in Poirot's voice, only cold acknowledgement. She has played us all from the beginning. The journal, the interviews, the convenient revelations about the circle, all designed to lead us to the conclusion she wanted, and we followed like sheep. I rose, reaching for my revolver. Then we must stop her. Confront her now, before— No. Poirot held up a hand. We have no proof. Lady Ashworth is clever, Hastings. She will deny everything, claim ignorance, perhaps even accuse us of harassment. We need her to reveal herself. We need her to spring her trap, while we spring ours. What do you propose? Poirot's mustache twitched with grim satisfaction. We go to the mausoleum as planned, but we do not go as hunters seeking a killer. We go as witnesses, ready to observe the final act of Lady Ashworth's drama. And at the crucial moment, when she believes her victory complete, Hercule Poirot will step forward and show her that the little grey cells are not so easily deceived. The fog had thickened by the time we departed Whitehaven Mansions, wrapping the city in a shroud of grey that seemed almost deliberate, nature itself conspiring to provide atmosphere for the evening's confrontation. In the taxi, I found myself reviewing everything we had learned, fitting the pieces together in this new and terrible pattern. Lady Ashworth as the facilitator, Lady Ashworth as the killer, Lady Ashworth as the architect of a grand deception that had claimed at least 3 lives, her husband, Blackwood, hardly, and would claim more if we failed to stop her. Poirot, I said as the taxi wound through darkened streets toward Highgate. What if you're wrong? What if Pemberton really is the killer and Lady Ashworth truly is in danger? Then we shall save her life and apprehend a murderer. Poirot's voice was calm. But I am not wrong, Hastings. The little grey cells, they see clearly now. Lady Constance Ashworth is the most dangerous person in London tonight, and she does not yet know that we have seen through her mask. The taxi slowed as the gates of Highgate Cemetery loomed before us, wrought iron sentinels guarding the city of the dead. Remember, Hastings, Poirot murmured as we stepped into the fog. Whatever happens, we must let her believe she has won. Only then will she reveal herself completely. I checked my revolver one final time. Ahead, shrouded in mist, the Ashworth mausoleum waited. So did the truth. Chapter 6. The gathering storm, Highgate Cemetery at night was a place that seemed to exist outside of time itself. The fog drifted between ancient monuments and moss-covered angels, softening the edges of mausoleums and turning familiar paths into labyrinthine mysteries. Gas lamps flickered weakly at distant intervals, their light swallowed almost immediately by the grey murk. Poirot and I made our way along the main avenue, our footsteps muffled by the damp earth. Around us, the dead kept their eternal silence, but I could not shake the sensation that we were being watched, that eyes followed our progress from the shadows between tombs. The Ashworth mausoleum lies ahead, Poirot murmured, consulting a small map he had obtained from the cemetery's records office. Another 100 meters, perhaps. And the police? Chief Inspector Walton has positioned his men at the cemetery's entrances and along the perimeter. They believe they are waiting to apprehend a killer who will come to claim Lady Ashworth. Poirot's voice carried a note of grim irony. They do not yet understand that the killer is already here, has been here all along, directing events from the shadows. We rounded a corner, and the Ashworth mausoleum emerged from the fog like a temple to grief. It was an imposing structure, white marble darkened by decades of London soot, Corinthian columns framing a bronze door embossed with the family crest, and carved angels weeping eternally above the entrance. The name Ashworth was chiseled in severe capitals across the lintel. The door stood slightly ajar. Poirot raised a hand, signaling me to halt. We listened. From within the mausoleum came the faint sound of movement, the rustle of fabric, the soft tread of shoes on stone. She is here, Poirot breathed, preparing her stage. What do? We observe. We wait. And when the moment is right, his eyes gleamed in the dim light, we act. We positioned ourselves behind a nearby monument, a towering marble cross that provided adequate concealment while offering a clear view of the mausoleum entrance. The fog swirled around us, cold and damp, seeping through our coats and settling into our bones. Minutes passed. The sounds from within the mausoleum continued, dragging, scraping, the occasional muffled grunt of exertion. I gripped my revolver, my heart pounding with anticipation. Then, at precisely 8 o'clock, the bronze door swung fully open. Lady Constance Ashworth emerged. She was dressed for the occasion. Black coat, black gloves, a dark hat that shadowed her features. In her hands, she carried a small case, which she set down beside the entrance with practiced efficiency. She consulted a pocket watch, nodded to herself, and then retreated back inside. "She waits for someone," Poirot whispered. "The question is, who?" We did not have long to wonder. Within moments, a figure materialized from the fog, approaching the mausoleum with hesitant steps. As they drew closer, the gas lamp illuminated their features. Dr. Marcus Webb. I felt Poirot tense beside me. This was unexpected. Webb was supposed to be a suspect, not an accomplice. Or was he? The doctor paused at the mausoleum entrance, peering into the darkness within. "Lady Ashworth, I received your message. Most irregular, meeting here of all places, but you said it was urgent. Do come in, Marcus." Lady Ashworth's voice drifted from within, honey-sweet and welcoming. "We have much to discuss." Webb hesitated for only a moment before stepping through the bronze door. It closed behind him with a soft but decisive clang. Poirot moved immediately, crossing the distance to the mausoleum with surprising speed for a man of his build. I followed close behind, my revolver ready. At the door, we paused, listening. Voices from within. Lady Ashworth's cultured tones, Webb's nervous responses. The words were muffled by the heavy bronze, but the tenor was clear. She was in control. He was afraid. "Always knew you were weak, Marcus. Frederick said as much. Webb will crack under pressure," he told me. "Keep him close, keep him compliant, but never trust him with anything important." "Constance, please, I've done everything you asked. The prescriptions, the death certificates, the testimony, I've protected you at every turn. Why would I what, Marcus? Invite you here, ensure that you join your former colleagues in their eternal rest?" A low, cold laugh. "Because you're the last loose thread, my dear, the final witness who could connect me to the Circle's more distasteful activities. With you gone, there is no one left who knows the truth." "But Pemberton, they're looking for Pemberton." "Poor Martin, he served his purpose admirably. His body lies just there, behind Frederick's casket. The police will find him tomorrow, alongside your corpse, and conclude that the vengeful nephew killed you before taking his own life. A murder-suicide, the final chapter in a tragic tale of revenge." Another laugh, sharper this time. "Really, Marcus, it's almost too elegant. I do wish someone could appreciate the artistry." Poirot had heard enough. He gestured to me, and together we pushed against the bronze door. It yielded slowly, the ancient hinges groaning in protest. The scene within was illuminated by candles, dozens of them placed on ledges and sarcophagi, casting dancing shadows across the marble walls. Lady Ashworth stood at the far end of the mausoleum, beside an open casket from which a man's arm dangled limply. Harold Pemberton, Martin Ashworth, his face frozen in an expression of eternal surprise. Dr. Webb stood between us and Lady Ashworth, his face pale with terror. In her gloved hand, she held a small crystal vial filled with amber liquid. "Monsieur Poirot." Lady Ashworth's composure did not waver. If anything, she seemed amused. "I must confess, I did not expect you quite so soon. I'd rather hoped to complete my business with Dr. Webb before your arrival." "Your business, madame, is concluded." Poirot stepped fully into the mausoleum, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "The game, as they say, is up." "Is it?" She tilted her head, studying him with cool appraisal. "I think not, Monsieur Poirot. You have no proof of anything, only theories and speculation. I have Lord Ashworth's journal, which documents your role as the facilitator. My husband's fevered scribblings, easily dismissed as the delusions of a dying man. I have the testimony of Cuthbert Vine, who will identify you as the mysterious host of the Circle's gatherings. Vine is a coward who will say whatever protects him. His word against mine. I am a respected widow. He is a solicitor with a history of unsavory associations. And I have this. Poirot reached into his coat and withdrew a single sheet of paper. A letter, madame, written in your own hand, found among Mr. Hartley's personal effects, but overlooked by the police. In it, you arrange a private meeting for Tuesday evening, and you specify, most precisely, that he should dismiss his servants and prepare dinner for 2. Lady Ashworth's composure flickered. It was barely perceptible. A tightening around the eyes, a slight catch in her breath. But I saw it, and I knew Poirot had seen it too. That letter proves nothing. On the contrary, it proves everything. Your handwriting, madame, is distinctive, and it matches precisely the script on the invitation cards sent to Sir Edmund Blackwood and Gerald Hartley. Poirot's voice hardened. You wrote those invitations yourself. You arranged the meetings. You administered the poison, and when the pattern became apparent, you created a convenient scapegoat. The long-lost nephew returned for revenge, to take the blame. And if I did, Lady Ashworth's mask finally cracked, revealing the cold fury beneath. Those men deserve to die, Monsieur Poirot. Every one of them. They built their fortunes on the suffering of others. They destroyed lives without a moment's hesitation. My husband was the worst of all. A monster in gentleman's clothing who used his position to crush anyone who stood in his way. Including his own nephew. Including Martin, yes. Poor, foolish Martin, who discovered the truth about his uncle's dealings and threatened to expose them. Frederick had him framed, imprisoned, destroyed, all to protect the Circle's precious secrets. Her voice rose with bitter passion. And do you know what my husband said when I asked him about it? He laughed, Monsieur Poirot. He laughed and told me that Martin was an acceptable loss. Those were his exact words. An acceptable loss. And so you decided to avenge him. I decided to end them, all of them. Lady Ashworth's eyes blazed with righteous fury. I played the dutiful wife for 20 years. Watching Frederick and his cronies ruin lives without consequence. I smiled at their dinner parties, poured their brandy, listened to their boasting about the careers they had destroyed, the families they had broken, and all the while, I planned. The facilitator, Poirot said softly, you created the role yourself. Frederick thought it was his idea. He thought he was the one controlling the Circle, pulling the strings. But I was there from the beginning, whispering suggestions, making arrangements, gathering secrets of my own. A grim smile crossed her face. By the time I was ready to act, I knew everything about every one of them, their sins, their weaknesses, their fears. Killing them was almost too easy. And Martin Ashworth? He was innocent of the crimes you avenged. Lady Ashworth's expression softened slightly. Martin was an unfortunate necessity. He discovered my role in the Circle shortly after his release from prison. He thought I would be his ally, that together we could expose the men who had destroyed him. But he didn't understand. Exposure wasn't enough. Justice required blood. So you killed him? I freed him. Her voice was cold again. Martin spent 5 years in prison, dreaming of revenge he could never achieve. I gave him peace, Monsieur Poirot. I gave him an ending. You gave him death, as you gave death to your husband, to Blackwood, to Hartley, and as you intended to give death to Dr. Webb. Lady Ashworth glanced at the trembling physician, her lip curling with contempt. Webb is a pathetic creature who sold his patients' secrets for profit and wrote false death certificates for cash. His hands are as bloody as any of theirs. Perhaps. But it is not for you to judge, madame. It is not for you to execute. Then for whom? Lady Ashworth's voice cracked with sudden, terrible emotion. The police, the courts, the same institutions that convicted an innocent man on fabricated evidence. The same system that allowed Frederick and his friends to destroy lives with impunity? She shook her head violently. No, Monsieur Poirot. Justice failed Martin Ashworth. It failed countless others. Someone had to act. And so you became judge, jury, and executioner. I became what they made me. Lady Ashworth raised the crystal vial, her eyes fixed on Poirot with desperate intensity. This contains enough poison to kill 3 men. 1 swallow, and I join my victims in whatever afterlife awaits us. You cannot stop me, Monsieur Poirot. You can only watch. Madame, I implore you. No. Her voice was calm now, resolute. It is over. The circle is broken. The sins are paid. And Lady Constance Ashworth will not hang for the satisfaction of a corrupt system. She raised the vial to her lips. I moved without thinking, crossing the space between us in 3 swift strides. My hand closed around her wrist, wrenching it away from her mouth. The vial flew from her grasp, shattering against the marble floor and sending its deadly contents splashing across the stone. Lady Ashworth screamed, a raw, anguished sound that echoed through the mausoleum like a wounded animal. She struggled against my grip, but I held firm, and within moments Poirot was beside me, his voice soothing but insistent. It is finished, madame. There is no escape now, no final gesture. You will face justice, true justice, for what you have done. The fight drained from her body. She sagged against me, her elegant composure shattered, her face streaked with tears. Justice, she whispered bitterly. There is no justice. There never was. From outside, I heard the shouts of approaching policemen, summoned by the commotion. Chief Inspector Walton burst through the bronze door moments later, his face flushed with exertion and confusion. What the devil? Monsieur Poirot, what's happened here? Poirot straightened his coat, his expression grave but composed. Chief Inspector, may I present Lady Constance Ashworth, the Tuesday night killer? You will also find, behind that casket, the body of Harold Pemberton, also known as Martin Ashworth, her final victim. Walton stared at the weeping woman in my arms, then at the corpse visible in the candlelight, then back at Poirot. Lady Ashworth, but she was, we thought, you thought what she wished you to think, as did we all, for a time. Poirot shook his head slowly, but the truth, Chief Inspector, it cannot hide forever. The little grey cells, they see through even the most elegant deceptions. Lady Ashworth was led away in handcuffs, her black coat trailing behind her like a mourning shroud. As the police swarmed the mausoleum, securing the scene and photographing the evidence, I found myself standing beside Poirot, staring at the shattered vial on the marble floor. She almost succeeded, I said quietly. If you hadn't realized the truth. She was clever, Hastings. Perhaps the cleverest killer I've ever encountered. But cleverness is not enough. In the end, it is always the heart that betrays us. Poirot touched his mustache thoughtfully. She hated those men with a passion that consumed her, and that passion, it left traces. In her words, her actions, her carefully constructed narrative. The hatred was too perfect, too complete. It could only have come from within. What will happen to her? The courts will decide. But I think... Poirot paused, his expression softening with something like pity. I think that Lady Ashworth has already pronounced her own sentence. She sacrificed everything, her position, her freedom, her very soul, to destroy the men who wronged Martin Ashworth. And in the end, she became exactly what she hated, a monster who killed without mercy, who justified her crimes with self-righteous fury. A tragedy, I murmured. Oui, mon ami. A tragedy in the truest sense. No victors, only the dead and those who must live with what they have done. The fog was beginning to lift as we departed the cemetery, the first pale light of dawn touching the eastern sky. Behind us, the Ashworth mausoleum stood silent once more, its bronze door sealed, its secrets finally exposed. Tuesday had claimed its final victim. Chapter 7. Tuesday's Final Secret. 3 days after the events at Highgate Cemetery, I found myself seated in the drawing room of Chief Inspector Walton's private residence in Hampstead, an unusual venue for what Poirot had described as a necessary gathering of all parties concerned. The room was comfortably appointed, if somewhat austere, with heavy curtains drawn against the grey March afternoon and a fire crackling in the grate. Around me sat the surviving players in this dark drama. Cuthbert Vine, his face drawn and haggard, perched on the edge of an armchair as though prepared to flee at any moment. Dr. Marcus Webb, his arrogance entirely deflated, staring at his hands with the hollow expression of a man confronting his own mortality, and Chief Inspector Walton himself, standing by the mantelpiece with an air of barely contained impatience. Poirot occupied the center of the room, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his waxed moustache immaculately groomed, his manner that of a conductor preparing to lead an orchestra through a particularly demanding symphony. "I thank you all for attending," he began, his voice carrying that distinctive blend of courtesy and command. "I am aware that the events of recent days have been distressing, but there are matters yet unresolved, questions yet unanswered, and Hercule Poirot, he does not leave loose threads." "The case is closed, surely," Walton interjected. "Lady Ashworth has confessed. The bodies have been recovered. What more is there to discuss?" "Justice, Chief Inspector. True justice requires not merely the apprehension of the guilty, but the full illumination of their crimes. Those who suffered deserve to have their stories told. Those who remain must understand how they were deceived." Poirot's gaze swept the room, settling briefly on each face, and those who bear lesser guilt must be given the opportunity to make amends. Vine shifted uncomfortably. Webb did not look up. "Let us begin," Poirot continued, "at the beginning. 23 years ago, Lord Frederick Ashworth founded what he called the Circle, a private society of influential men who pooled their resources for mutual advantage. On the surface, it was merely a dining club. In reality, it was something far more sinister. He began to pace, his movements measured and deliberate. The Circle dealt in secrets, mesdames et messieurs. Its members gathered information, through servants, through associates, through any means available, and used that information to advance their interests. A word here, a threat there, a convenient piece of leverage applied at precisely the right moment. Careers were made, fortunes were built, and lives were destroyed. "We were not criminals," Vine protested weakly. "We merely facilitated arrangements." "You were blackmailers, Monsieur Vine. Let us not dress the pig in silk and call it a lady." Poirot's voice was sharp. "You extorted money, favors, and silence from those who could not defend themselves. You ruined reputations, broke families, drove men to despair. The Circle was a cancer at the heart of London society, and every one of its members was complicit." Vine looked away, his face flushing with shame. "But the Circle had a secret even its members did not fully understand," Poirot continued. "From the very beginning, Lord Ashworth was not alone in directing its activities. He had a partner, silent, invisible, operating from the shadows. That partner was his wife, Constance." Walton frowned. "She told us as much at the cemetery. She called herself the facilitator." "Oui. But what she did not tell you, what she perhaps did not fully acknowledge even to herself, was the true nature of her involvement." Poirot stopped pacing, his expression grave. Lady Ashworth did not merely assist her husband. She controlled him. She was the architect of the Circle's most profitable schemes, the strategist behind its most ruthless operations. Lord Ashworth believed himself the master. In truth, he was merely the face. "How can you know this?" Webb asked, his voice hoarse. "The journal, Doctor. Lord Ashworth's private journal, which his wife so helpfully provided to our investigation." Poirot retrieved the worn leather volume from his coat and held it aloft. "At first glance, it appears to document Lord Ashworth's activities, his meetings, his arrangements, his profits. But a careful reading reveals something curious. The handwriting changes subtly but consistently at key passages. The entries describing the circle's most complex operations are not written by Lord Ashworth at all. They are written by his wife. I stared at my friend in amazement. This detail had escaped me entirely. Lady Ashworth kept her own records within her husband's journal, Poirot explained. Hidden in plain sight, as it were, she documented her role, her decisions, her growing contempt for the men she manipulated. And she documented something else as well, her plan. Her plan to kill them, Walton said grimly. Her plan to destroy the circle entirely, and to do so in a way that would never point to her. Poirot opened the journal to a marked page. Listen to this entry, dated 6 months before Lord Ashworth's death. F grows careless. His health fails, and with it, his judgment. The circle becomes a liability. When he is gone, the others will expect to continue as before. They do not understand that I am the circle. Without me, they are nothing, and soon they will be less than nothing. A chill ran through the room. Even Walton, hardened by years of police work, looked unsettled. Lady Ashworth began planning the murders while her husband still lived, Poirot continued. She studied poisons, learning which compounds would mimic natural causes, which would leave no trace, which could be administered without detection. She observed her victims' habits, identifying the perfect moment to strike. And she created a narrative. The vengeful nephew returned from prison to seek justice that would explain everything and point away from herself. But Martin Ashworth was real, I interjected. He did assume a false identity. He did infiltrate the circle. Why, Hastings, and this is perhaps the greatest tragedy of all. Poirot's voice softened with genuine sadness. Martin Ashworth, Harold Pemberton, was indeed seeking justice. He believed that his uncle and the circle had conspired to destroy him, and he was correct. But he did not seek revenge through murder. He sought evidence, documentation that would expose their crimes and clear his name. He was investigating them, Walton said slowly, not killing them. Précisément. Martin Ashworth spent 7 years building a new identity, gaining the trust of the very men who had betrayed him, gathering proof of their corruption. He intended to bring them down through legal means, to see them tried, convicted, humiliated as he had been humiliated. It was, in its way, a noble aim. Then how did Lady Ashworth discover him? She recognized him. Poirot's expression was grim. Lady Ashworth had known Martin before his imprisonment. She watched him arrive in London society under his new name, observed him ingratiating himself with Gerald Hartley, and understood immediately what he was doing. At first, she saw him as a useful tool, a convenient scapegoat for the murders she was planning. She allowed him to continue his investigation, knowing that his presence would provide the perfect cover for her crimes. But something changed, I said. Something changed, Poirot agreed. 3 weeks ago, Martin Ashworth discovered the truth about Lady Ashworth's role in the circle. He found evidence, letters, financial records, proving that she had been the facilitator all along. More than that, he discovered that she had poisoned her own husband. He confronted her, Walton guessed. He did. And in that confrontation, he made a fatal error. He offered her a choice, confess her crimes voluntarily or be exposed along with the rest of the circle. He believed that she too was a victim of Lord Ashworth's manipulation. He did not understand that she was the manipulator. She killed him. She killed him, lured him to a private meeting with promises of cooperation, and administered the same poison she had used on her husband. Poirot closed the journal with a soft snap. His body was hidden in the family mausoleum, waiting to be discovered at the appropriate moment, the final piece in her elaborate frame. Silence settled over the room. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the wind had risen, rattling the windows in their frames. "What I do not understand," Walton said at length, "is why she came to us at all. If she wanted to remain above suspicion, Why draw attention to herself by reporting the invitation? Ah, Poirot raised one finger. This is where Lady Ashworth's cleverness became her undoing. She needed the police to discover the pattern, the Tuesday murders, the identical invitations, in order for her frame of Martin Ashworth to succeed. She needed us to hunt for the vengeful nephew, to build the case against him, so that when his body was finally discovered, the conclusion would be inescapable. She was directing the investigation, I said, the realization dawning. Using us as her instruments. Précisément, Hastings. Every piece of information she provided was carefully calculated. The journal, which she claimed to have barely read, was in fact her own creation, a document designed to lead us exactly where she wanted. The names of the circle members, which she revealed with apparent reluctance, were breadcrumbs on a trail of her own design. Even her fear, her trembling hands, her tearful pleas for protection, all performance, all manipulation. But you saw through it, Walton said. Eventually, yes. But I confess, Chief Inspector, that Lady Ashworth very nearly succeeded in deceiving even Hercule Poirot. A rueful smile crossed my friend's face. It was the invitations that troubled me. Why send them at all? A killer who operates in secret, who poisons without detection, has no need of theatrical flourishes. The invitations served only one purpose, to create a narrative, a story of ritual and revenge that would capture the imagination and obscure the truth. He turned to face the two surviving circle members, his expression hardening. And now, monsieur, we come to the question of your own complicity. Vine paled visibly. Webb seemed to shrink into his chair. You participated in the circle's activities for years, Poirot continued. You profited from blackmail, fraud, and the destruction of innocent lives. Martin Ashworth spent 5 years in prison because of crimes in which you were complicit. You knew the truth, or suspected it, and you said nothing. We were afraid, Vine whispered. The facilitator, Lady Ashworth. She had evidence against all of us. We were trapped. You were cowards, Poirot said flatly. But cowardice, it is not a crime punishable by law. The question before us now is what justice demands of you. He turned to Walton. Chief Inspector, I have prepared a detailed account of the Circle's activities, drawn from Lord Ashworth's journal and corroborated by independent evidence. It documents numerous instances of blackmail, fraud, and conspiracy. The statute of limitations has not expired on all of these crimes. Walton nodded slowly. I'll need to review the evidence with the Crown Prosecutor. But if what you say is accurate, it is accurate, then charges may be forthcoming. Walton's gaze fell upon Vine and Webb, cold and implacable. I suggest you both engage competent legal counsel, gentlemen. You may need it. Vine buried his face in his hands. Webb sat motionless, his expression blank with shock. However, Poirot continued, his tone softening slightly. There is another path, a path that does not lead through the courts, but through conscience. The victims of the Circle's schemes, those whose lives were destroyed, whose reputations were ruined, whose families were broken, many of them still live. They still suffer the consequences of what was done to them. What are you suggesting? Webb asked hoarsely. Restitution, Doctor. Confession. Amends. Poirot's eyes held no mercy, but neither did they hold cruelty. You cannot undo the past, but you can acknowledge it. You can compensate those who were harmed. You can use whatever years remain to you in service rather than selfishness. The law may or may not pursue you, that is for others to decide. But your conscience, that is yours alone to answer. The silence that followed was profound. I watched the two men grapple with Poirot's words, seeing in their faces the struggle between self-preservation and something that might, perhaps, be the stirrings of genuine remorse. I will cooperate fully with the investigation, Vine said at last, his voice barely audible. And I will make what restitution I can. Webb nodded slowly. his shoulders sagging with the weight of years of accumulated guilt. "As will I." "Then perhaps," Poirot said quietly, "some good may yet emerge from this tragedy." An hour later, after the formalities had been concluded and the others had departed, I found myself walking with Poirot through the fog-shrouded streets of Hampstead. The afternoon had faded into evening, and gas lamps flickered to life around us, their warm glow pushing back against the encroaching darkness. "A remarkable case, Poirot," I said at length. "One of your most challenging, I should think." "It was a case of mirrors, Hastings." Poirot's voice was contemplative. Every surface reflected something other than the truth. Lady Ashworth presented herself as victim when she was executioner. Martin Ashworth appeared to be villain when he was, in his way, a seeker of justice. Even the circle itself, which seemed to be a brotherhood of mutual advantage, was in truth a web of mutual destruction, each member trapped by the other's knowledge. And the murders themselves? Do you believe Lady Ashworth was justified, even partially, in what she did? Poirot was silent for several paces. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with thought. "The men she killed were not innocent, Hastings. They had caused great harm to many people, including Martin Ashworth. If there is a cosmic ledger in which such things are recorded, they had accumulated considerable debt." He shook his head slowly. "But justice is not vengeance. Justice operates through law, through process, through the careful weighing of evidence and the measured application of consequence. What Lady Ashworth did was not justice. It was retribution, cold, calculated, and ultimately self-serving. Self-serving? She gained nothing from the murders. She gained satisfaction, mon ami, the pleasure of seeing her enemies fall, the intoxication of power over life and death." Poirot's expression was grave. "That is the most dangerous motivation of all. A killer who acts for profit can be understood, predicted, ultimately controlled. But a killer who acts for the sheer joy of killing, disguised perhaps as righteousness or justice, that is a killer without limits." "You think she enjoyed it?" "I think she told herself she was an instrument of justice while reveling in the destruction she caused. I think she convinced herself that her victims deserved their fate while taking pleasure in their suffering. I think." Poirot sighed deeply. "I think she is a tragic figure, Hastings, but not a sympathetic one. She had choices. She made the wrong ones, and now she must face the consequences." We walked on in silence, our footsteps echoing on the damp pavement. The fog swirled around us, cold and implacable, as though the city itself was mourning for all that had been lost. "What will happen to her?" I asked finally. "The courts will decide, but I suspect—" Poirot's voice trailed off, then resumed with quiet certainty. "I suspect that Lady Ashworth will not live to see trial. She is a woman of fierce pride and absolute conviction. The prospect of public humiliation, of being exposed and judged by the very society she manipulated for so long, I do not think she will endure it. You think she will take her own life? I think she will find a way to escape, one way or another. The prison cell cannot hold a spirit so determined to remain free." A sad smile crossed Poirot's face. "It is perhaps the final irony. Lady Ashworth devoted her life to controlling others, manipulating events, ensuring that everything unfolded according to her design. And in the end, the only thing she can control is the manner of her own departure." We had reached the main road where taxis were beginning to appear through the fog. Poirot raised his hand to signal one, but paused, turning to face me with an expression of unusual solemnity. "There is one lesson to be drawn from this affair, Hastings. One truth that the little grey cells have pondered deeply. What is that? The past. It does not die. The wrongs we commit, the hurts we inflict, the debts we leave unpaid, they do not vanish with the passage of time. They wait, they fester, and eventually, inevitably, they demand payment." He touched his mustache thoughtfully. "Martin Ashworth spent 5 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. That injustice, left unaddressed, eventually consumed everyone connected to it, the guilty and the innocent alike. A sobering thought. Indeed, but also, perhaps, a hopeful one. The taxi pulled up beside us, and Poirot opened the door. If wrongs demand payment, then perhaps rights demand recognition. Perhaps justice, true justice, is not merely the punishment of the guilty, but the vindication of the innocent. Perhaps the best memorial to Martin Ashworth is not vengeance for his suffering, but acknowledgement of his truth. I climbed into the taxi, considering his words. And how do we achieve that? We tell his story, Hastings. We ensure that the world knows he was innocent, that he died seeking justice, not revenge, and that his memory deserves honor rather than infamy. Poirot settled into the seat beside me, his expression softening. It is a small thing, perhaps, but small things, accumulated over time, can change the world. The taxi pulled away, leaving Hampstead behind. Through the window, I watched the fog swirl and shift, revealing glimpses of street lamps, pedestrians, the ordinary life of a city that had no idea what darkness had lurked in its midst. "The Tuesday night murders," I murmured. "It will make quite a story." "It will, mon ami." Poirot's eyes twinkled briefly. "But perhaps, in the telling, we shall emphasize not the darkness, but the light that eventually dispelled it. The truth has a power of its own, Hastings. It is patient, it is persistent, and in the end, it always prevails." The fog began to lift as we drove toward home, revealing the first stars of evening glittering coldly above the rooftops. Somewhere in the city, Lady Constance Ashworth sat in a prison cell, contemplating the ruins of her grand design. Somewhere, Cuthbert Vine and Marcus Webb grappled with the prospect of atonement. And somewhere, perhaps, the spirit of Martin Ashworth, innocent, wronged, ultimately vindicated, found a measure of peace. Tuesday had claimed its final victim, but truth, as Poirot had observed, endured. And so concludes The Tuesday Night Murders. We hope you have enjoyed this journey into shadow and revelation, where nothing was as it seemed, and the most dangerous killer wore the mask of victimhood. If this tale has moved you, consider leaving a comment below. We cherish every word from our community of mystery lovers. And until next time, remember, the truth is patient, persistent, and in the end, it always prevails. Good night, dear listeners. Sleep well, if you can.